as a plan was to have a dam within the river for irrigation, but also to have hydropower production in Senegal, in Sambangalo, and in Guinea, Conakry, and today also, if I may say, I think there was an inauguration of some sort at in the LRR about power coming in. That power is coming from Guinea Conakry, from the Caleta Dam, and this was all part of the organization that developed, that sat down and strategized to develop power stations which can be shared among the countries, to build bridges that can connect people, and also, and this cannot be done in an atmosphere of antagonism between countries and between heads of state. So our diplomacy, First Republic, ensured that these bases for development are set, that peace and stability is maintained in our sub-region, and that we do have clear outline for the promotion of the social development of these countries, energy production, road communication, understanding and movement of people. Again, on this score, I would want to also say, as part of this overall strategic thinking for the future, the organization also brought in Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau was a critical factor. One, there was instability, and the line of communication beyond the formal country-to-country relations was not there. And it was, again, Gambia, together with Guinea-Conakry, proposed that Guinea-Bissau should be part of it. It should be part of it because what we are talking of concerns our immediate sub-region. It should be there because we thought that it can be anchored within the organization, and it provides another channel of communication within our sub-region. Because when the heads of state meet, I mean, we have the formal meetings where they will talk about the agenda. But I think another important aspect of meetings of heads of state is the side meetings they have to discuss special issues. So the OMVG provided that framework to discuss not only about river basin development, but to discuss about critical issues that might be taking place in a given country, and try to see how collectively this can be addressed. Of course, also Guinea-Bissau has, there are parts of tributaries of the river Gambia that flow from Guinea-Conakry. He says I have 5 minutes, and I haven't even started. So, so I don't know what to do. Actually, as I said, this is just one part where we are saying that what the foundation, some of the things you are seeing today, the foundations were laid during the First Republic. And the strategic analysis, the strategic vision at that time enabled us to plan and to reach the goal where we have started. I think we have, and in this respect, we are only seeing the beginning. The Second Republic delayed a lot. It delayed some of these things. The bridge should have been there 20 years ago. Because in 1992, when the heads of states met in Conakry, the OMVG, just before the coup, it was then agreed that we should go ahead with the bridge, and then the barrage can wait because of the environmental and social problems. So immediately after, both President Diouf and Sadauda embarked on fundraising visits. But this process was interrupted by the military. I would also want to talk to you about, this is just one aspect, I also want to talk to you about some of the other things like the support to the liberation movements. You all know we have very limited resources, but despite that, the Gambia in the international fora consistently spoke in favor of the liberation movements. And in some instances, there are certain positions which these movements would give to us, and we would propose it, we would express it as a Gambian position in support of these liberation movements. Even with our limited resources, the Gambia brought children, brought young men from these countries that were going through the liberation struggle, like South Africa. There's a whole group of young South Africans that were brought here and educated here. to develop the manpower capacities of South Africa so that when it comes, it can assume, take part in the development of their country. And I want to say that in 1992, when we had I think in 1994, just before the coup, we had an OAU summit in Cairo, and there Mr. Thabo Mbeki, then he was not president, had audience with President Jawara, specifically to thank him for all the effort that the Gambia has done in contributing to the liberation of South Africa. I think this is a credit, and it's not surprising that when Nelson Mandela was released and the independence inauguration, President Jawara was one of the guests, and I was privileged to accompany him to the inauguration of the first black president of South Africa. I would also want to, in my 5 minutes, talk about, I think that we have to mention, and that's the human rights. I think on the continent, the Gambia is recognized internationally and continentally as the champion country for human rights. So it was a tragedy. I think it was an abuse, it was an insult to turn back the clock to the point where the country that was championing human rights became the greatest culprit of the abuse of human rights. The greatest culprit. Is that why we were having so many explosions? So, yes, I think this was, and this commitment to human rights is exemplified by the role we played in the establishment of the African Charter, establishment of the Charter, and I think it is a recognition of this commitment and the forward-looking policies on human rights of the Gambia that we today have the center established in the Gambia. When Gambia wanted the center, there was hardly any challenge, simply because at the continental level, it was recognized that this is a position, this is a choice which certainly goes to the Gambia. Finally, it's not all smooth sailing, and I think I just want to mention one or two things. In foreign policy, it's very expensive. It's not cheap. Maintaining missions overseas costs money because you don't pay them in dollars, you pay them in hand currency. Going to attend conferences, going to attend negotiations all cost money, so it's not easy to conduct it. But despite our limited resources, we tried. Because of resource constraints, we could not have the type of representations we would have loved to have. Because one thing we had in mind in the First Republic was cut your tail according to your size. We were very much mindful, and the President and the Permanent Secretary Ministers were very much aware and conscious of resource constraints. So we had only limited representation, and one way around it was to have multiple accreditations, so that we have one ambassador in one place and he would cover a number of countries. Mr. Tal briefly mentioned the structural adjustment. When this came, that again created difficulties, because then the economy wasn't performing as should be, and there were the expansion. Civil service was limited, recruitment was limited, and that also impacted on our foreign service in terms of staffing. One problem with limited representation and limited staff within headquarters is that in some of the international organizations, meetings are an integral part of the process. And with 1 or 2, 3 staff members, it always proves almost impossible to attend all the important committees that you are required to attend. So those are some of the constraints, and we try to do our best to address them. It has never been easy, but I think in hindsight, I can say with our limited resources, with our limited abilities, we've been able to achieve a lot. And one last thing on peace, I would want to say, because I just spoke about the regional level. I think at the global level, the Gambia also was chairman of the Peace Committee, the Islamic Conference Peace Committee, trying to negotiate peace in the Iran-Iraq war. For several years, the Gambia was chair to that, and there was a lot of shuttle diplomacy between Iraq, Iran, and other important stakeholders. This mission has always been led by the Gambia, by the Gambian president, and some of the supporting staff were Mr. Tal. So it's good we have him here for historic reasons. I think today we have 3 generations, so you have a lot to learn, and I'm sure you should have a lot of questions to ask on some of these things. There's still a lot more, and I hope we can have the opportunity to explain and go further in some of the issues. With these remarks, I want to thank you all very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sonko. I think you have significantly expressed the importance that what I've said in the beginning, that Gambia with our small size, and the fact that I quoted Berkeley Rice was done intentionally to also seek your views about how some people from outside were thinking during the time that we were gaining our independence. We're talking about the small size, we're talking about the resource challenges that we face. But I think at that international forum and locally, you have buttressed the strategic direction and thinking that the PPP government engaged in to sail, Gambia through those hard times. And you talk about the resource challenges, and that gives me the opportunity to move to Mr. Tamuja to discuss specifically. We want to know your experience, but most importantly, these economic challenges that this beautiful country faces in the post independence period, and what were the strategies that were employed by the PPP regime in tackling those issues. And I think Mr. Daggett mentioned about the structural adjustment program, which is still significant, and it has been blamed for most of the challenges that we face today. So, yes, carry us through those periods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MC, and I will thank Mr. Ibutal, whom I always call Koto, and my colleague Balong Sonko, about the same nature, I hope. I have the difficult job of jumping over the bar that's already been set. It's been set very high. The deliberations I've had from Mr. Tal have touched on an issue of economic importance, which I will briefly touch on in terms of our development objectives and perspectives. Mr. Sonko also developed the idea of democracy and human rights, which are essential ingredients also for economic progress. You cannot hope to develop properly unless there's some element of freedom, there's some element of choice, there is some element of respect for certain rights, property rights, access to land, access to other facilities, the ability to negotiate and contract. These are all rights that are necessary for economic progress to be made. Somebody will say, well, what about communist China? When I was in China during Deng Xiaoping's time, what they did not do is to democratize the politics. But the commercial sector was let free in certain regions, and it was in the gradual approach. That's what you have seen paying off now. And Xi Jinping is saying the next phase is to open up the remaining provinces. China did not go and open the country one time. But that's so much for human rights. We'll see the rest later. Now, I will be looking at the period of Gambia's development from about independence in 1965, when Bolong and I just came of age, to the period immediately preceding perhaps the coup d'etat, some of which has already been highlighted by Mr. Tal in his speech when he told you that you could take your Gambian dollars to Marble Arch and change for pounds straight without going through any bank. That happened during the First Republic. Now, those of you who were around then, we attained independence in 1965, 18th of February. We became a Republican state in 1970. But even on the eve of independence, the so-called colonial masters weren't sure that Gambia could make it on its own. Hence the skepticism, the attempt to infiltrate saboteurs like Bakri Rice and others to come and write that detrimental article, and the attempt to even integrate Gambia with Senegal as one republic with two languages, as they had done in Nigeria and Cameroon, British Cameroon then. The Gambians resisted this and insisted that they wanted independence on their own terms, which we got on 18 February. We were college students then and very hot-headed at the time. I suspect you will be about the same now. But let me give you a few indicators. By 1965, when we became independent, if I remember rightly, there were only 3 high schools to serve the entire country. The 3 were all located in Banjul because Armitage was then not a high school. It was called Armitage High, but it was not a high school. They were not taking school certificate, they were not taking Cambridge, they were not taking anything. So it was a middle school like Crab Island School was, although a little bit more endowed. And they produced very good students too. We had 3 high schools. The only higher institution of learning was the Union College. And it targeted only the primary teacher certificate level, which is the very bottom of the educational hierarchy in education skills development. Notwithstanding, Gambia decided to go ahead and forge as a nation. First, by making sure we were united in purpose and objectives, and 2, by cautious use of resources that were available. Cautious and prudent use of resources that were available. In 1965, Gambia's GDP per capita was something like $265. It's not $10,000 as it would be today. It was about $760 something per capita. Singapore then had $200 per capita income. But we followed different paths and it led to different things. Now, with that amount of resources, with a population of almost 350,000 at independence, it was a difficult exercise in fiscal management. Especially when you understand that there were only very few university graduates available in the Gambia at the time. Very few. You could count them on the palm of your hands. We managed and forged ahead, trying to improve on education, on infrastructure, on all aspects of our life, including foreign relations. But not forgetting that we had to live within our means meaning here what we could produce on our own, as well as what good friends and donors would support us with in terms of plans that we had evolved for ourselves. I want you to underline that, plans that we had evolved for ourselves. And it was not surprising that with intensive work in the agriculture sector, in resource management, in forestry and other areas, fisheries, etc., we gradually started exporting and building resources. And by 1973, I think that was the year when Gambia exported the highest tonnage of groundnuts, 175,000 metric tons of nuts. And these were not the nuts you see here today, these were premium grade nuts, commanding premium prices in the international market. Today, our groundnuts are bought and used as bird feed in UK, not even for human food. And we don't talk about hundreds of thousands of tons, we're talking about 30, 40. When we make 40, we are elated that we have done very well. By looking at GPME infrastructure, you know that was not built for 40,000 tons. That would have been a wasted investment if that were the case. Now, what were the elements that helped us during this period? Sound management, rule-based system, and strict adherence to policies that were evolved by government through the democratic process and put in place for everybody else to follow, including the Prime Minister and later on the President. I will tell you a story. I have listened to some of these witnesses testify in the Janet Commission, for instance, where it was said, even by text messages, you could instruct some people in the central bank to disburse funds. To me, that's an impossibility. And I'm sure Mr. Tal did not sleep the night he had that, because it could not be thought about between the period 1965 to 1994. No. I can remember a situation where I went to the Treasury to follow a voucher to pay me certain things. And another voucher was brought because the wife of the president then was to travel on a private mission. The principal accountant at the Treasury just took his red pen and cancelled the voucher and said, but you know, she's not entitled to this, she's not an employee of the state. She's not a civil servant. When she travels with the president, that is the time we pay allowance. When she goes on a private trip, that's our business. Government has nothing to do with it. Could anybody have imagined something like that between 94 and 2017? No. And this was not millions you were talking about. This would have been probably $100 and something thousand to pay for her and the maid and so forth, etc. on a quick trip, probably to Senegal also. But that was the type of civil service we had, where people could say no and still return to their job the next day. Because the law was the law and everybody was below the law. And that is important also when you look at economic development. If the law cannot be enforced, nobody will come and put his money here unless he's crazy or she is crazy. We had this development up to a period of about 1970s. In 1973, we were hit with the Sahelian drought. But again, government rallied, meetings were held, strategies were evolved, procedures were put in place, donors were approached, and resources were mobilized. We managed on this until the early mid-80s, when, of course, disaster struck. I think we were so successful in the early years that people became complacent. Expenditure control was relaxed. Monies were taken from GPMB reserves meant to stabilize prices and support the production sector and used to pay for civil servants' advances, most of which were not repaid. And of course, GPMB started going into the liquidity problems. At a time when government resources in terms of revenue from taxes and non-tax-based revenues were also declining because people were not making much money. I mean, business was collapsing, the groundnut trade was the pivot of everything, was failing because we didn't have enough groundnuts and so on. So a crisis situation sort of developed. It's like that by 1984-85, it became critical that we were defaulting on some of our debts, and the Bretton Woods institutions put the government of the Gambia on notice that if you don't do something, we're going to come down hard on you. We'll declare you in default, which means you cannot even borrow 2 bottles from outside your borders. That would have been a disaster. But again, sober heads prevailed. I was just returning from graduate studies when Sir Dawda formed a council of economic advisors to look at the problems and evolve policy proposals. That sort of council was headed by Mr. Tom Senghor, then governor of the central bank. I happen to be a young economist attached to the center from NIB to help in keeping the minutes and drafting some economic policy proposals and so on. What came out of that, except for minor adjustments by the World Bank and the IMF in terms of putting, developing a matrix of implementation, were essentially homegrown. The civil service, which was deemed to be overbloated, had to be cut to size. Control measures which were put in place, like currency control, exchange control, price control, etc., had to be removed. Licensing procedures for import restrictions were also removed, and all these things were done. But the government said and stayed on course with the population that the excesses will be cut out, but we will not abandon them. I remember that speech by Sadauda. And he compared the country to an overloaded bus. He said the excess passengers will be offloaded on the wayside, but we will not forget them. We'll send a rescue. As a result, programs were quickly developed based on the economic recommendations from the task force to set up a job retraining program and finance scheme jointly funded by government and NIB. Such that with these developments, our ERP was so successful, despite the bitter pills, that Gambia was hailed the blue-eyed boy of the Bretton Woods system. And everywhere it was being quoted. If you look at the book published by Malcolm McPherson, Structural Adjustment in the Gambia, a success story. You look at that, Professor Malcolm McPherson was in the Gambia until the late 90s from Harvard Institute of International Development, seconded to the Gambia under the support of the World Bank, USAID, to help the government in macroeconomic management. He was assisted by quite a number of people like Brendan Walsh and etc. and so forth, working closely with government Ministry of Finance personnel, the NIB, etc. Now, our ERP was difficult, painful, but it succeeded without incident. There was no case of violence from the date the ERP was launched to the end of the ERP in 1989 when we moved on to the PSD. And Gambians themselves were seeing the benefits. It was not government or Sadada coming telling you, see what I have done, what I have achieved. People were seeing benefits. Incomes were rising rapidly. People were emboldened to invest in the country. Foreigners were coming into the country to spend their money. Tourism was rising slowly but steadily. Exports were reactivated in the fisheries sector, in the agriculture sector, and many other places. Such that by 1993, on the eve of independence, we had excessive inflows of foreign currency in this country. I was then managing director of a bank, and believe me, all the banks ran out of dollars because we had come out of a scarce foreign exchange system to an overnight surplus and flooding of the market with dollars, pounds, name it. It was all over. So in the exuberance to cover our external positions, we closed our eyes, we were buying, only to realize that our dollars reserves were depleted. We all had foreign currency and no dollars. So the central bank had to come to our assistance to give on IOU to give you dollars until you can reverse your positions. Now this was the situation when disaster struck in 1994. So I think one needs to disabuse our minds from the idea that nothing was done between 65 and 94. It is not, you would not have been here anyway if nothing was done. Your very survival and the fact that you are all educated is testimony to the fact that something must have been done some time ago to cater for you and the ones coming after you. When we finished school, there was no guarantee you could get a scholarship to anywhere. The government just didn't have it. There were only small areas where the government would give scholarships. That is why in the technical fields like medicine, engineering, etc. You wanted to study law, they tell your daddy to pay for it if you can. You want to study economics? Well, we need economics, but we don't have money to send you to these expensive universities, and so on. So people had to do part of their work here in anticipation when you get the qualifications. Some foreign country will give you a scholarship. Some of us studied through that scheme on the US Sahel Manpower Development Program. The ODA of the British government had similar programs. The Russians helped with areas of medicine, vet medicine, agriculture, etc. So that the highly educated people you see in this country today managed it that way to get to university. But the important thing is When you go to 1994, why that difficulty continued to wreak havoc to this economy was the fact that the rule-based system and the law and order system was abandoned. We abdicated and kicked the law away. We decided that we could run a government by a sort of a personality cult, verbal instructions, rank in the army or whatever. I think we have all learned the hard way that this is no way to run a government. A government is an organized institution to put together the aspirations of the people of a particular geopolitical entity and to manage those aspirations given resource constraints to achieve the objectives of development, which are peace, stability, improvement in living standards, etc. That's what we all want. But when you abandon the law that is supposed to constrain everybody to walk in straight line, and you expect that they will walk in straight line, you're joking. This is exactly what has happened. We dissipated resources. We abandoned our frugal methods of public fiscal management and moved on to fanfare and monumental development. Folklore. Now, I hope the younger generation, because for us we have served our time in public service and in the private sector. We think we have done something useful, but you have to carry the baton. As President Kennedy said in 1960, the baton has now been passed to a new generation of Americans. I am telling you, the baton has now been passed, or is being passed to a new generation of Gambians. You have to step up to the plate to stand up to your responsibilities and do your part. It is no use just sitting here criticizing government. They haven't done this, they haven't done that, they haven't. You mobilize and do some of the things that you are saying government should do. But let's get back to economic management. Government, like any individual family here, has to live and progress. By that, I mean we have to collectively survive, live and progress. Now, to do that, we want everything. But nobody has everything. God hasn't given that to anybody. Nobody has everything. We are given some things, and some things we don't have. What this means is, as Mr. Sonko said, you cut the coat according to the cloth available. We optimize given the constraints that we can do nothing about. Economists call it taking them as given. If the police put a no entry sign here, and I'm analyzing traffic flow, I have to take that no entry sign as given. I cannot do anything about it. Because the police have the power to block that road. They have blocked it for whatever reason. For me, the economist is not my problem. I have to take it as given and then do the analysis of what is available. We call that in economic theory constrained optimization. You are trying to maximize even certain limitations that you are confronted with. And this is where it becomes necessary to look at some of the weaknesses that we have in our system that we need to address. All of this can be derived from the two speeches that preceded my point here. We need better relations with Senegal. Not only because Senegal needs it, but we need it too. This is a country, from independence to now, the population has increased, what, threefold or fourfold or tenfold to 1-point-something million, almost 2 million now. But 2 million may be a big figure to any of us here. But in terms of economic development, it's not a big figure. You want to develop a project anywhere in this country, you're looking at a market size of maximum 2 million people. A medium-sized factory could supply that in 1 week. Then what would it do? Close until the products are sold? That's not an efficient way of investing. You need a wider market. This is where regional and sub-regional cooperation comes into play. Notionally delete the border lines as far as business is concerned, and let businessmen have access to a wider market. We need that. Otherwise, we'll be condemned to craft work and those kinds of small-scale trading, etc. We cannot build efficient plants, etc. Even in the area of electricity. An optimal electricity plant will supply more than 2 million people. So we are buying suboptimal plants, hopefully to try and supply 2 million people. We could have gone for a mega-sized plant, which in the long run will have lower cost and bring our electricity costs down, but we don't have the consumption capacity with 2 million people. You look at our transport infrastructure. If there is a shortage of food in Guinea-Bissau, for example, and Gambia has a bumper harvest, we have no way of taking the food to Guinea-Bissau except flying it or going by sea. To get it to Guinea-Bissau on time for them to use it. Because we have to go through Senegal, and if the relations are not good, then you've had it, you cannot pass through. Same thing to Mali and other places. The problem in the West Africa region is borders. And for the small countries like us, it is becoming a very important issue that we must look at and address. Senegal is interested. We have had a model before. We have abandoned that model and it worked. For those of you who don't know, BICI Gambia was owned by Business Senegal. It was a subsidiary of Business Senegal. But a subsidiary was incorporated in the Gambia and it paid its taxes in Gambia and repatriates its profit for pieces to take into its balance sheet and make its own report to the Senegalese government. The same model can be used for any business. A Gambian, a Senegalese doing business could have a subsidiary in Banjul and one in Dakar or Louga or anywhere. And wherever you're located, you could pay your taxes to the authority in the area of operation, and there should be no problem. So the borders become immaterial. And that is something that the younger generation must look at. If the period post-2016 has to make a difference, we talk about how Gambia has decided. We the people, I see all kinds of slogans here. But I implore you to back up those slogans with action on the ground. Taking advantage of the words of wisdom we have learned from my elder brother, Honorable Utal, and from Mr. Bolong Sonko, Honorable Sonko, who was one time foreign minister, spending many, many years in the foreign services. Some of you who asked the question, what is the foreign service doing? I think now you will change your mind. Because it sets the geopolitical stage for all players. If the political atmosphere is not conducive, nobody bothers to think about economic activities. You saw what happened during the impasse. It was short duration, but everything almost came to a standstill. Some people ran and hid behind under beds and things like that. Some could not even go to the Nar shop to buy bread. Now, if that had developed to something more catastrophic, where would we have been today? So reckless operation at the government level could impact every one of our lives here. And that is something that we must try to learn from and move away from. We must also build our regional and continental relationships, because what is in vogue today in the world, what we are seeing developing, is going to be most likely a global market over which we cannot do anything about. So if we are not going to be able to influence its development or change the trajectory, then let us prepare ourselves to take advantage of opportunities that it may generate for some of us, some of the countries that are going to be affected. And these are issues that I think will be very important for the younger generation. I consider this period to be a stock-taking period. Where we came from, where we are, and where we're trying to go. Few of the things there are of economic importance. Most of it is an attitudinal problem. Oh, we're a small country, we need not worry. Singapore is a small country today, it has per capita income almost higher than the United States. We started at the same level. We started at the same level. In fact, we were a little higher, $265 versus $220 per capita. We got independence in 65 February. They got independence in 65 October. So we're a few months older than them. The baby that was born then is no more a baby. Except, of course, if you want to look at the period only the last 14 years. But anybody at 50, much more 54, cannot by any stretch of the imagination be called young. Gambia is no more a young country. We may say it's aging, but its youthful period is long gone. We now need to put our hands to the wheel and see what we can do. Management is an issue. Technical capacity is an issue. But more important, markets are an issue. But government must have the wisdom and the sensibility to manage well so that we can have a business atmosphere that will be conducive to rapid progress. Not just progress, but rapid progress. As Nelson Mandela said, we cannot be looking back because we have a lot of catching up to do. They have lost 120 years or so. Apartheid lasted for about 120 years in South Africa. The ANC was formed in 1920. So he said, while we'll try and address the wrongs that were done, we are not going to be bogged down by the past. We're looking forward to catch up with the rest of the world. And this is what we need to do. We need to see the 22 years as an aberration and then put it aside. Then look forward and say, now where do we go from here? What have we got? What are the mistakes that we have made in the last 22 years or in the last 50 years? How can we correct them? Some of the things are of attitude. If we believe we can do it, there's no reason why we shouldn't do it. If you say you cannot do it, then you have condemned yourself to failure all straight away. And that is the attitude that we must have. It's nice to celebrate, to have a dance, to have a party, to have dinner, drinks. But I think what needs to be in the mind of every Gambian youth today is, where do we go from here? How can we bring about improvements? What resources do we need? If you are tempted to do something wrong, to be involved in fraud, also ask yourself the question, is it worth it? How many people am I depriving? You don't need billions to survive. You only need comfort in life to bring up your family successfully and move on, pass the baton to another generation of Gambians. And I think in the question and answer time, if you have specific questions to specific areas, I will attempt to answer them. I was advised I had 3 minutes. Just a brief on my background. I left school, I started with agriculture. I studied agriculture I became an officer to the senior level. Then I joined the National Investment Board and served in that body for about 10 years. And I retired from civil service work and went private in the banking sector, and I served for another 10 years before I finally retired from the banking sector. So I have experience in the financial services sector, in agriculture, and in public sector management, in all during the First Republic and part of the Second Republic. So I see things that I think most people should be able to see. So when they don't act as if they had seen these things, I wonder where they have been looking. And these are issues that probably a forum like this should bring up, and we share experiences. We cannot teach you anything, but we can share our experiences with you and jointly work towards a common objective and a common trajectory to carry this animal called Gambia to the ultimate pinnacle that we want it to go to, so that we can at least look back and say, we were successful, the British were wrong, we were right. Everybody else was wrong, that we couldn't make it as a nation. We have made it as a nation. I think that would be the ultimate reward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Njai. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, and I've been pressured from the organizers that we must end this. I've been pressured that we must end this this session now, and I don't think it is fair that I am giving this platform with senior experienced people and giving only 1 hour to discuss 30 years, more than 30 years of history, the fundamental pillars or foundation of our progress as a nation. So what I want to do now, I will want to end this session, maybe in the next 10 minutes. But with that, before coming here, I did some research. I was on social media. I was, thinking, and just to compile a few questions that most young people in this country keep asking. Your generation have been blamed for not doing enough, because maybe our idea of development was to see structures, was to understand certain issues. But you've been blamed for a lot, and this is a platform, I think, where you can. You've already shared your experience, but I want to ask just 3 questions to each one of you, so that we can, and then you can have your final say, and then from there we end the session. So the first question goes to Mr. Tam, and the question is basically, how prepared was the political leadership for independence? How prepared was the Gambian political leadership for independence? A lot of people say we were not prepared, this and that. So I think this is a moment to look at that. And Mr. Sonko, the question to you is: somebody raised something on social media, on Facebook in particular, and the question is about independence. Do we have a mere flag, an anthem, or an independence that gives us the right of choice, decision, action over our national affairs and economic independence? And the last question to you, sir. Like I was mentioning, the blame on the technocrats. And one of the guys mentioned that Gambia's technocrats perpetrated the worst assault on our country since independence. And they conclude and say they are the worst in our midst. How would you respond to such statements from the public? So we'll start with yourself.
I believe the question is how prepared were we for independence. I find the question a bit surprising, because independence was something given. I mean, it's the end product of a political evolution. Now, I think it's like a woman getting married. I mean, if you are married at 18 or 21, you cannot be said not to be prepared for marriage. In some systems, you can marry even at the age of 14, and some others get married at 25. So where do you draw a line? I think it is erroneous for any belief to exist that we were not prepared for independence. For the simple reason that, even from the point of view of ideology, Kwame Nkrumah and his generation used to say, the great thing about independence is the ability and empowerment to decide for yourself. That's what independence is about. It's not about what you have or can do, but for once you can say, I will go to Brikama, and nobody will tell you, no, you won't go to Brikama, you go to Bakau. The sovereignty of your decision. That's what independence is about. If you don't have sovereignty of your decision, others will decide for you. And every human being has a right of existence and also of his belief and to decide for himself. That being said, I don't know what criteria used to say that we were not prepared. Gambia was prepared. Let me tell you one thing. In the 60s, late 60s, from 60 to 70, Gambia had one of the most indigenized public service in the whole of West Africa. I'm telling you this, that by late 40s, end of the 40s, and early 50s, we had heads of departments who were Gambians. Mr. Paso was head of the post office, also postmaster general, and a post which had hitherto been held by an expatriate. Mr. Carroll was head of the treasury, even as early as I think the 50s. Mr. V.O. Jani was head of the service department as early as when we were young. Dr. Jones was head of the medical services, and people like Demaso were director of public works. So, in fact, Gambia had the people who could run governments and systems. Politically, Gambia was in the forefront of political evolution in West Africa, and the struggle for emancipation. It did not start with Sardaura. You can go all the way back to past Small. Mr. Small and the Thomases and the Fosters were actually some of the founders of the independence movement, which met in Manchester and in Accra, and which brought out Nkrumah. In fact, the secretariat of the movement in West Africa for independence was for a long time held by Gambians, and this was in the 1940s. You had people like Senegal, James Senegal, the street. Maybe many young people don't know why the street in Banjul is called James Senegal, because Mr. Senegal was in the forefront of political emancipation. So I don't know what prepared this. I believe that Gambia was prepared for independence. That is why, as early as the late 40s and early 50s, most of the parties that existed, it was not only the PVP, even the United Party under Per Njai had published their manifesto to demand for independence almost at the same period that all the other African countries like Ghana, Sierra Leone, etc. had independence. And I believe in front of me, I can see younger generation will remind me of the politics of the Gambia. I think Mr. Diouf, Pabi Diouf, Emmanuel, your father is Kuni boy. Okay. My colleague, my friend, we went to university together. We had special names we call each other. And Kuni boy, I believe, is the son of Mr. Diouf, the brother of Sayer Diouf. These were the political giants of Half-Dyke in the late 40s and 50s. So, if politics was being organized and harnessed soon after the Second World War, in fact it was before, but because of the war, a lot of things had to be suspended. But as soon as peace came about in 1945, politics was again vibrant in the Gambia. And your uncles and your grandparents and many others were active. I mean, say Omar Faye of Dobson Street, Usman Cheng of Lancaster. These are people who were in politics, Gambian politics, Gambian politics, way back as 1940s. Mr. Oldfield. So it is erroneous to believe that politics as we know it only started maybe on the eve of independence. It has been a process that way back after the First World War, with the Treaty of Versailles, 1819, things started to evolve. And these were halted only because of the war. And anybody who knows Gambia history knows that Mr. Small had to, going over the border to avoid problems is not a new thing. Mr. Small, who was the was a kind of who spearheaded political change in this country, and unionism and cooperatives, had to seek exile in Senegal, and he was shielded by Ngalandou Diouf, and he was publishing his papers from office in Dakar to take care of Gambian issues. So my take is that Gambia was prepared for independence in 1965, and in fact it was getting too late. Sierra Leone had got independence. Ghana had gotten well before. In fact, we were almost the last. In fact, if we didn't even ask for independence, they would have just abandoned us and go, you are free. So don't buy this idea that we are prepared. And that's why there were trained people who were able to take over immediately. At 65, 67, almost the whole system was Gambianized because there was a foundation based on our parents and our grandparents who had struggled to put Gambia where it was, so that the foundation being laid at 65, we were almost the last to be independent in this West Africa. So we were prepared.
Thank you so much. So we'll just give them 2 minutes each so that you can conclude. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the questions you raise are very important, but they are disturbing, very disturbing. I cannot understand a slave says, I am not ready to be free. What sort of person are you? Where do you come from? What being are you? You have the right to decide your destiny. The person ruling you is of the same dignity, same intelligence as you. It's independence time, you say, no, I don't think we are ready. I have to wait until 1975 to get independent. What being are you? How do you think? Gambia should have been independent not in 1965, but in 1957 or even before. Whether you have, or are we waiting to have 10 PhDs or 100 PhDs to be independent? No, we have our dignity. We have our inherent ability. Before 1965, there were people running departments that constitute a government. These are Gambians. Sadauda was head of the veterinary department before independence. You can count them. So the issue of not being ready by 1965, you have to have a really denatured mind to say, you are a slave, no, I don't want to be independent because I'm not ready for what? What are you waiting for? To take your destiny into your own hands and shape it. In 1965, that's what we did. That's what Sadauda did. He didn't have the PhDs, he didn't have the masters, but he had the confidence of the people. And they talked with them and came up with the idea. The Gambian people were ready. They were ready by the time Francis Small and others were agitating, Gambian people were ready. That was an expression of an internal situation which he, as an educated man, tried to canalize and bring out to the front. But Gambian people were ready because we were independent by nature, and it was time we took our destiny into our own hands. And really, as young people, do not think that by staying as a slave, whether it's under Yaya Jammeh or whether it's under the colonial period, that yes, that is how I will be developed. No. You have to take your responsibilities. You have to take your intelligence. You have to take into account your ability to forge what you think is good for this country and for this country's people. Nobody will do that for you. Nobody will do it in your place. That is a responsibility which you and I and others coming share, and we are proud to be sharing that responsibility and to work in that regard. The other thing you mentioned about the flag and things like that. The flag, the national anthem, these are concrete manifestations of a state, of a country. You don't have a flag from any region or whatever. And that flag is what gives us the recognition that Gambia is a sovereign state, so we can open embassies. Gambia is a sovereign state, we can interact and sign agreements with other countries. Gambia is a sovereign state, it has a flag, we can go out and contract loans in the name of the Gambia to develop the Gambia. So if you stay at the superficial level of seeing a flag flying and think this is it, no, we didn't see it that way. We saw that as symbols of a bigger work that needs to be done. But that has to be done in the framework of independence, and that independence is manifested concretely in various forms, and the flag is one form. And that's why when the president travels, or when the diplomat is presenting his letters of credence, the national anthem of your country is signed, is a re-echoing of the independence of your country. To now say that, no, we are not ready in 1965 for independence, I think this is a slavish mentality which we need to abandon. And also, I think there is a problem. I mean, not with you young people, because we didn't know some of you what happened. What we have experienced, what we have witnessed in this country, particularly with respect to people who know better, who should have known better, is a collective amnesia, selective remembering of what has passed. We forget what has happened. We've tried in this brief period to tell you what has happened in the past, how we try to address some of these challenges. And clearly, I think in the circumstances where we are, with the limited resources, limited capacity, which again doesn't mean that we still have to wait for region to say, no, now it is time to be independent. If with those limitations, we are still able to create a foundation of a country that has been forging ahead and that has been envy of other countries. You talk about the civil service. Gambia has produced one of the finest civil servants. I'm not saying nationally, at the international level. That is recognized. In the human rights negotiations for human rights, an outstanding spokesman was Mr. Tal. During these negotiations for the Arts Summit, the particular convention relating to desertification, I was a spokesman for the whole of Africa, and I can tell you that agreement, the content of the agreement that finally brought the parties together was drafted by the Gambia, and I drafted it together with my delegation. This is recognized. Recently, you have other cases where Gambians have been given prominent leadership roles in continental and global levels. We were not a product of America, we are not a product of the United Kingdom, we were a product of you Gambian people. We studied, we lived here, we assessed this analysis, and that analysis and ability that we had developed here is what we took to international stage, and that has made our colleagues realize that this person can be entrusted with this responsibility, and they gave it to us. These are credits that go to you. It's not me, it's not him. It's a recognition of the maturity, of the level-headedness, and of the competence of the Gambian civil service. Unfortunately, when you decide to put rules aside, and your promotion is based on how much you can color at a political party, then that professionalism is destroyed. And I think this is what Kamu was referring to when he talked about economics. We have developed a system which other countries have asked us. Other countries have been brought here to see how we have handled some of these difficult situations and issues like structural adjustment. If you have all that, and you can still sit back and say you are not ready to be free, then something must be wrong with your mind. I think you need to look at it. Thank you very much.
Properly, you're saying, as far as the Gambia is concerned, it is the technocrats who have done injustice to this country. Now, let me disabuse your minds that that is the craziest expression I've ever heard in my life. At independence, what would you call the technocrats? Well, let's put the question another way. Who are these technocrats? In political affairs of a state, you have the politicians who go to parliament and make policy. You have the executive branch, public services of the Gambia that Mr. Sonko was talking about earlier on, comprising the permanent secretary going on down. The minister is the political head in our system. He goes to parliament with policy proposals. He comes back with acts of parliament or approvals, resolutions from parliament, and hands over to the technocracy to implement. Now, at independence, it was this very same technocrats who stepped up to the plate to guide the politicians. Sadauda was head of a department at veterinary. He had some clues about administration, but he was not a professional administrator, nor was he a professional manager. He was a scientist. And he is still a scientist. He is still a fellow of so many veterinary schools and faculties around the world. He thinks as a scientist, he acts as a scientist, and he brought that scientific approach, in fact, to his politics. The technocrats stepped up to the plate to guide the politicians, despite the limitations in their numbers, the lack of opportunities to further their education. No preparatory courses prepared by anybody. Maybe that's why somebody was saying whether we were prepared. Because you saw Eritrea when they made some sort of peace with Ethiopia, the entire cabinet went on 30-day retreat for training in administration and management. The Gambia didn't do that. They were already seasoned administrators. Their numbers were few. They had a rounded education which enabled them to look at things critically and advise the incoming administration, and they guided them throughout. Of course, by late 80s, some of the politicians felt, well, they now have enough experience to challenge the technocracy. And that led to the disastrous administration that I said led to the Bretton Woods putting us on notice, because the politicians felt they became so powerful that some of them decided to work both fast and loose. And in finance, you cannot do that. In economics, you cannot do that. You can disobey economic laws, but you cannot avoid the consequences of economic reaction. In finance, if you spend more than you have, well, there will be a debt to settle someday, whether on your own volition or by compulsion, and that debt has to be paid. This was what Gambia faced in 84-85. We were spending because credit was cheap and easily accessible. All over we were borrowing, internally and externally, and spending on things that were not adding anything to GDP, or very little to GDP. So come the date of reckoning for payment of those debts, there was no money to pay. And creditors were saying, hey, you pay me, whether you have or you don't have, you have to pay me. So we went into ERP. It is the same technocrats who, in the Second Republic, decided to abandon the ethics and calling of their respective professions. When text messages are taken as sufficient authority to do or not to do. When verbal communication was the rule of the day. No, sir. In our day, you get a minute from your boss to act in a certain way or to guide him on certain issues, and you go down in writing and send it back to him. The president gives you some instruction. You are not very comfortable. You write back and ask for guidance and specific mandate, and they do that. It is when you abandon those things that you get into trouble. But quite honestly, I think on balance, the Gambian technocracy did very well. And they are still there to do very well. But probably we need to do some little rethinking. As I said, we abandon certain rules of the game that we now need to bring back to the forefront and move on a rule-based system, not just ad hoc on our political whims and caprices. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please help me to thank them. And I think we'll hand over to the next panel. And we apologize for taking longer than expected, but I think we need to, continue the discussion later. So thank you very much, Mr. Tal. Thank you, Mr. Jai and Mr. Sonko. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, hello, are we here, everyone? So I just want us to give the panelists another round of applause for that very engaging panel discussion. It is said that administrative problems are supposed to be dealt with by administrators administratively, and I believe these administrators or experts have done justice from 1965 to 1994 towards the economic transformation of the country, towards the promotion of democracy and good governance, as well as strengthening our education system. Am I okay now? Yes, as I was saying, that they have done justice towards the economic transformation of the country, towards the promotion of democracy and good governance of this country, as well as strengthening our education system, even though we had some shortcomings or challenges. And as the National Pledge of the Gambia says, if we continue to pursue our personal goals over the collective responsibilities and objectives of people, we shall be divided. And if we are divided, we shall definitely fall. And it is now up to us as young people to continue from where these governments have stopped, and then see how best we can make sure that Gambia reaches where it is supposed to be. I just want to call on my co-MC, Mr. Haruna Drame. He has been hiding here since morning. I just want him to come on stage as well. Mr. Drame, you're supposed to be here. Before we have the next panelists on board, we just want to have a short musical interlude because it seems we are serving food and most of us are a bit distracted. And all work, no play makes Jack at all, boy. So we just want to call on Miss Our Bling, one of Gambia's best female artists, to come and do a short musical interlude for us whilst we have the next panelists prepare for their session.
I'm currently teaching on this contemporary because we want to be beyond what they
Oh, you have a TV?
Yes, online.
It's online.
Yeah.
You mean where I live?
Where do you work?
No, I have retired now. I do consultancy. Sometimes
The Gambia concert for today. Are we really independent?
yes, if we choose to, but if we applicate our responsibilities and allow other people to take up those responsibilities, but we are independent, and the issue is we have to take charge of that independence.
So if so, how come we are still demanding loans from West and then we are still begging support from other countries?
The biggest country that takes loans from other countries is the United States. So the loans is not an issue. Banks and others are there to do loans. The important thing is how do you use that loan? We need loans to develop, we need grants to develop, because all the challenges we have, we cannot generate the resources necessary. But we need those loans to be judiciously used to develop us.
In 2016, Gambia Gambians went to the podium and then decided their future. Did Gambia really decide it? Gambians?
Yes, I think Gambians decided. We decided to go and change regime. They have had enough under the Gambia regime. And it was only proper. And that again places emphasis, a vindication of the policies of previous regime under Sarauda in terms of the human rights. Jammeh will talk about what his developments are, but every Gambian has the fundamental needs. The human rights was extremely, almost every family has got some complaint or other of a relative who is arrested arbitrarily or extrajudicially.
What role should the government play in our quest for absolute independence?
No, you can't get absolute independence, and that's why we have agreements. That's why we have international obligations. But the important thing is that the government should be a facilitator, create the environment for economic and social development, promote capacity building, and give opportunities. The people know what they want, they can take care of it. All that they are asking is opportunity and a fair playing field. Then
how about the citizens too?
Yeah, I mean the citizens, that's what I mean. The citizens of the Gambia, as well as those who are resident voters.
So since independence, the Gambia has 3 presidents so far: Sadauda Kairaba Jawara, Yahya Jammeh, and Adam Barrow. Who do you think achieved the most in their first 2 years in office?
No, I think government is not about 2 year, 1 year. Government is over a period. If we take Sadauda's period and compare it with that of Yahya Jammeh, obviously there's no way of comparison. Not only in terms of infrastructural achievements, which the Jammeh tries to boast of, but more important, because even in this area, the First Republic did a lot more infrastructure. But also what is important is laying the foundation of the state to operate within a system that is respected by all and not arbitrarily imposed things.
ñu ñaata cases lañ fi am si victim center bi nguur gi gëstu leen bàyyi leen si mbedd mi ñaata jigéen leen fi tëj ñu woon góor te ba tey amul wér gu yaram déedéet retrobation never ever ne duñ ko nangu ba nguur gu ñu jógee ñu mun si delluwaat suñ amee luñ bugg ñun la ñuy fàtte waay ndax seen bopp rek la ñu tal. Can I hear you guys say never again? Never again. Yeah.
Okay, now just a phone term. Can you sing the national anthem?
No, that one I usually
No, I will just
I have it on record, so I refer to it. But I think the important thing is to use the words of the national anthem to inspire and guide our actions.
So I will just try. Okay, your final words to our viewers.
I just want to
use us and campaign machines, we say never again. When you tell the why, till the new juggy one, I say never again. When you abuse the office, I say never again. You have to guess the same I'm the victim center me. Good to get sued like violence and better me. That's a jiggle, let me take you on door. Never say I'm on where we are, I'm daily preparations. Never, ever, you never can go back. Ñu jógee ñun duñ fi delluwaat suñ amee ñun bëgg ñun la ñuy fàtte waay ndax seen bopp rek la ñu tal ñaata jigéen si office ñu leen di sexually harass lu tax suñ place néew that's the question you gotta ask waxal ñaata jigéen la fi seen doom yi disappear nangu seen alal te rey leen ñu ñaañu reappear bu ñu nax kon bu ragal la wax let's share our stories nit ñi xam ñu tax pour suñ doom yi ëllëg ndax bëgg ñu dundal lii let's fight today and tomorrow ndax ñoo leen war a why, till a new juggy one, I say never again. Good man at you, when you done, I victim, say never again. When you tell why, till a new juggy one, I say never again. Good new abuse, the office, I say never again. should protect every woman. That's the union Dr. Tay, that's for Yema Siman. Sexual harassment, that's for many, I'm a deadline. My back to work, that's for doing solutions and guidelines. You know, dollar jigging, but we are less represented. Siga now, let you take, we wanna be independent. Nyamsun, I'm a young, look at you, I'm better. Want to do you nangu, what will listen to when you tell the why, still in your jacket one. I say never again. Pull in your use, I send campaign machines. We say never again. When you tell the why, still in your jacket one. I say never again. Pull your abuse, the office. I say never again. I'm a little girl, I'm a loyalty. Chico. I'm a little girl, I'm a loyalty. If it is about Chico, money, I'm a little girl, I'm a loyalty. If it is about Chico, I'm a little girl, I'm a loyalty. If it is about never again. When you tell the why, still in your jacket one. I say never again. Pull in your use, I send campaign machines. We say never again. When you tell the why, still in your jacket one. I say never again. Pull your abuse, the office. I say never again. Never again. Speak up now. Never again. Never again. Speak up now. This goes out to each and every victim. You are not alone. You are not alone. I am here with you. Yeah, I am here with you. You are not alone. You are not alone. We are here with you. We are here with you. It's our bling bling.
Chill vibes on this beat.
I think what we need to do, first of all, we have to have consensus, critically informed citizens who realize their rights and duties and are prepared to make sure they fulfill their obligations as citizens. Because when we do that, then we will naturally be able to build the kind of leadership, that we deserve, the leadership that is visionary and leadership that we can make transparent and accountable. So for me, this is the way forward, and this is what we got to do. Yeah.
That they are calling on them, but I will just make it fast.
Okay.
Gambians are going to be foolish and then vote for a new president. Do you think that Gambia has decided really?
Yes, we have decided. We decided to end dictatorship. We decided to usher in democracy. We decided to end, corruption, abuse in all forms, violations in all forms, inefficiency, and all of that. That, for me, 2016, what it signifies that we have decided now to have democracy. But that decision has to be backed by action, and I think that action was limited. One, the government did not put itself in a position to, consolidate that decision, and I think a lot of our citizens also fell back, and so we want to now generate that interest, that commitment of our citizens to implement their decision, so that we determine the Gambia we want. So that this event, that's why we say the theme is from the Gambia has decided to the Gambia we want. So this is our
Celebrating independence?
Well, I was a schoolboy. Independence. It was a memorable day in those days. It wasn't like today, and I used to be very excited, honestly. And we have march past, so I was marching at Makati Square in front of Jawara. I still have one of those pictures. So it was a very nice time at the time. time. But even though right now, when I think about it, it's with regret, you know.
Okay.
So I think I got to go.
No. Do you know how to sing the national anthem?
Yes, I know. But I would have said no.
Okay, your final words.
Well, my final words is Gambians to realize this Gambia belongs to us. Today's Independence Day. Somebody asked, but government is doing this. And Makachita, why are you here? And I said, look, this independence doesn't belong to the government or present power. It belongs to you and me. And so any Gambian should be able to assemble anywhere and engage on the affairs of the country. So my final word is, Gambians, let's take responsibility. Let's take leadership and take ownership of our country and not leave the country in the hands of elected and appointed public officials, politicians, and people.
Junior is the president of the Gambian Press Union, and also the editor-in-chief of the newly launched Chronicle newspaper. Can we really congratulate him for adding this very important platform to the Gambian media? On the left-hand side, we have Mr. Emmanuel Juice, the chairperson of the newly launched established Can we give a round of applause and congratulations?
For me, yeah, we are
Mr. Juice, some of us who witnessed the early days of dictatorship know him. He was a human rights advocate. He was part of the before the 2000, when young children came out, expressed their satisfaction and their distress of the way their colleagues were treated by the state and then the
so
they were shot
Gambia is
while running away
dependent
from
on Accra.
some of them were
1994 became a new case as a multi-party democracy.
and his colleagues were those who came out of the time to defend young people.
One, the Gambia must be able to look inwards within, be able to tap from its resources and be able to transform the economic end. That is, for me, I think we have in the Gambia land. So you could make the use of these resources to build our economy.
The Second Republic.
What role should the government play in our quest for absolute independence? I think the government will have a role to play. One, the government must make sure that citizens are informed, educated about their rights and responsibilities, and their corresponding duties. They also should create an enabling environment where young people will flourish in our
very few people had hope that the Gambia would survive after independence, fronting an American anthem, what is called family rights, to proclaim the birth of an proclamation that this nation is just born cannot survive in the international
system. The first rule of a citizen is knowledge for self. We must understand ourselves first as citizens, know our obligations as citizens, know our responsibilities as citizens. So once we are able to do this, we will contribute
and to survive. That challenges of course.
The government has three presidents so far. Sato the Karabajawa, Jami, Adam Oparo, among the three, how do you think achieving both in their first well, for me, I think Jami did better. For me, I will give much credit to Jawara. For the fact that he fought for the Gambia was doing well. His honeymoon with the Gambians was very nice. But for that of Barrow, he is the most unpopular president as far as I'm concerned when he assumed power in his first place.
In 94,
for me, the most interesting moments for
those countries were reverting democracy.
I think having the University of the Gambia for me, because this created an avenue for very young Gambians to
500
500 degree. I think it started, way back, when Gambia had independence in 1999. Sorry, when Gambia had the university in 1999. But obviously, I started to enjoy this facility in 2016, as a student enrolled into the university. So for me, I think it's the greatest achievement so far as independence is concerned.
Do you know how to sing the national anthem?
Obviously. Obviously.
How can you sing?
Do I need to sing or do I need to decide?
Sing it or you can decide?
So like I said, we have to interrogate this question. To really recognize our independence. Are we really independent as a nation? If yes, what does independence mean? How does it change our lives? What type of independence do we have? Is it a class political independence? Is it economic independence? Cultural independence? It is all these things. So today, center for discussion will revolve around and prospect. What can we do to prevent I believe that organic factors that brought about development especially as
Question.
back putting with us and by the brutal benign whatever might be bad but the very that really socialism, sacrifice, hypocrisy, you name it. But never give us
What am I going to say?
It's not a way forward. What can we do for it? Now we can and then we can start it very
Thank you very like all of you, I got my freedom in the morning and then I got this country. So this is what I celebrate today. I'm the president of the Gambia
Not good. Come on, you speak English there. We cannot speak English. Language.
Come on, please. Hey.
Yes. But we are comedians. And we are not good at English. And we are not good at cramming dates. We're supposed to be.
But you are good in singing.
And then, no, we are Gambians. Don't worry if you don't know. Wait. Okay, there. Come around. Okay, I am Pamodia, but I am one last all the way from Christ.
Since then, I have
got to be embarrassed over a job of half the week. Yes, that's how the team works. That's how
and today you guys see Gambia Council.
I was then the chairman of the newly independent establishment.
The question I want to ask
we are free like a part of
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Mari Chubati. I'm acting in this largely some media background and yeah, so that's what I'm a Pan-Africanist, originally Pan-Africanist.
So there are certain things, certain items that we really have.
Thank you very much. Madi, Sheriff, and Mr. Joe. Mr. Joe, the first question is for you. I think there has been a discussion insofar as our history is concerned. And many people are of the view that the fight and resistance against impunity and dictatorship started in 1933 or even a couple of years ago. In my view, it started in April 2000. Innocent kids were shot when they came out.
Then Gambia used to
fight. Can you briefly take us through this fight and identify
and look into so that we can also revitalize or rebalance certain things like the climate sales. That's so that we can start exporting European.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's give and take. They take from us, they take from them. It's the reason why we even say integration. So we should actually integrate with other countries, depend on them, they also depend on us. So life is a give and take, like Bafu says.
Gambia is been known for a democratic state for the past years of Jawara's regime, and now we pass across 22 years of Jammeh, which was accused of violating the human rights. And now, what view will you give to the people so that they will see the Gambia pushing forward?
Well, I think we've come a long way. Now we're in the transition process. Then during the former regime, if we are celebrating independence, they are not organized another activity elsewhere. But today we have seen that the people are bound to celebrate independence, and we are here also trying to embrace the occasion our own way. My view is let everybody, especially the young people, get back to the Constitution and know what their rights are, know what the Constitution entails, and then I think from there on we can all contribute towards national development.
Well, Mr. Comedian, we've seen it for the past, in 2016, the Gambians went to the polls and decided, and they used the slogan, the Gambia has decided. Do you really think that the Gambia has decided?
Well, we have decided. What was Gambia's main aim was to remove or oust the former regime, which is the regime of Jammeh. That was why we voted in for the coalition. Now that we are in the transition process, let's see how it, how it goes. We are still hopeful. Yeah. Gambia really decided.
It's really decided. What's your take, Bugudabi?
He has already said everything, and it's a group. So the reason why the Gambians decided is to delete the idea of dictatorship and then actually bring democratic state. So I believe that's my take as well.
So what do you think the government, the action that the government will take in order to complete the foundation of the Gambia as a nation to be a complete and a fully independent? Because they said it's independent, but most people are questioning that because they think that we are not fully independent. So what do you think the government will take as a step to make this foundation complete?
Well, I think Gambia is independent. That is why we have a president, we have the full executive body. We have the legislature, which is also good, and the judiciary is also independent. I see no foreign or external rule. To me, I think we are in the right way, in the right process, because you've seen the Constitutional Review Commission. They are going round asking the views of the citizens of the country. This is all geared towards encouraging Gambians,
most especially even the TRRC also.
Yeah, so the commissions are also coming. The Human Rights Commission is also coming. I think we are on the way. So let's hope for the best. Yeah.
The only thing that the government should try and then work is like I'm not saying there's no transparency or accountability.
Yeah, no, there should
but
be.
we should try and then improve on that. When there's transparency and then accountability, then it will help, or it will go a long way, like in helping like the country
and always fulfilling promises. Yeah, very important.
But Mr. Comedian, are you not part of us?
How can three people talk at the same time? At the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think he's just teasing me. Since independence, the Gambia has 3 presidents, who is Sadauda Kerba Jawara, Yahya Jammeh, and then we have Adama Barrow, current president. And then now, which among them do you think performed best in the 2 years of presidency?
we are comedians.
Yeah.
And then we are here for everyone.
Yeah.
And we are also Red Cross members as well. Usually it counts a lot. So we're not saying that like we'll be taking sides but this life is a give and take. And then once somebody comes, somebody goes and then another one comes. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
They all participated in different ways. So we're just hoping that
to me, Gambia is developing. So the presidents are also developing. Someone would take, stop, the other one would take, the other one stop. So that's how it goes.
Just like the wall of saying goes, I do not put in that. So we also participate. It is not even the presidents themselves, but us the citizens as well. So I believe they've all participated very well. Yes. Kudos.
And you, Mr. Comedian, what's your take on that? The Gambia experiences 3 presidents. Who among them performed best in office?
Yeah, each of them did their part, and the other one comes, did his part, go, the other one comes. So we hope that it continues like that and better. I can even say, Bugana, they all participated well. One, Sarado Jawara brought independence, for instance. Yaya Jammeh brought integrity. And then Adama brought democracy, freedom of speech. So they've all participated. Independence to integrity to freedom. Yeah. So that's it.
Now take us back to memory as a child. I think growing up as a child, what are the most enjoyable memories of independence?
Probably when we used to represent our schools.
Exactly.
Yeah, from March past.
You used to represent our schools. Marching,
enjoying singing the national anthem.
Those are the only memories. Those are the only ones,
Right.
The only memories, and then left, right, right.
Okay, let's sing that. I cannot sing that.
Are you gonna sing?
I cannot sing.
So how should I know we can sing?
No, of course, because the other comedians done it.
No, I can sing.
I'm gonna sing it. You're gonna sing it. Can you please sing that along so that we will make others, the viewers watching, to remind them of this song?
Okay. Jangal kati, yo jangal jambari. Lawyer, doctor, minister, Adama Baro, Yaya Jammeh,
Jamara Bunyowe, Mujoko, Yaya Jammeh. 22 years, Mumaja dem way still mo tam dem na. Arabaro mo tam get try. Nem ko bala ñu meko space ku mu noki. Am comfort zone am su ko defé dem kanam. The next 10 years, president will stand for presidency. PP meaning people's choice, vote for us in advance.
Right. So question is very boy.
Hey. Wait. So you're gonna highlight this one. So you're gonna present. Okay.
Well, it's nothing though. We could have gone to Banjul, but yesterday we had a program here, the Freedom Concert. So we slept late and didn't wake up early. So we thought that Westfield is much more closer, and we believe it's all the same. We've been going to independence celebrations, and it's more like the same thing that showcases. But here, if we come, we have relevant stakeholders that will remind us of certain things, and then look at the way forward. So that is why proximity and probably relevance too. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You said last, so then I don't know.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think one point I would pick up was one sentence that Yaya Jammeh usurped power, constricted the political space, and violated every right. My question to Mani is, speaking from a civil society point of view, how can one man hold country together? How could he, speaking from your point of view, why did things fall apart?
You are not fair to me, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I think listening to Emmanuel, that's the conclusion we will come tonight. Half on earth, really.
The reason why us citizens,
especially when you mention 2013, you have all of these folks in mind too. And I was just saying this 2 days ago that there was a whole government in mind too. Because in addition to the people you mentioned, you'll find a Secretary General there, you'll find the CES there, you'll find governors, ministers there. So that Malta at one point had a government sitting there. So how did this happen? Really? And me, I'm not going to talk about
we try to see how best that we can able to contribute immensely towards the nation.
How this happened is
than trying to be competing with one another or trying to get citizens to one another. I mean, living in a Gambia that you know, we are trying to look at each and every person as to how
if you understood what is a citizen,
do a whole lot of things for you to be top there.
And we really
fulfill
the functions of a citizen.
To come together
Certainly,
and then
we couldn't
develop
have
the nation. Because
one
today
person
here at the monument,
sit
you
over our
have
heads
different
like some
CEOs that
law.
are here to make
So
sure
I
that
think it was a
independence
gross
is
failure of citizenship.
So we need more of
by our
this
citizens as a whole.
organization so that we can be,
and so
we can attend our goals.
we have what happened. But that's a very general answer, and we can further interrogate that to break it down. So that when you come down to the civil society, I know it's been a good subject, and you said it well, the space was constricted. But also because the civil society itself wasn't even aware that they were civil society. When you look at the Gambia and compare to Senegal and the rest of the world,
we need to
civil society is not a space you go into and live in
this is
to
what
earn
we
a
need
salary.
to do, and then this is
Civil society, I guess, like lawyers,
all the time.
it's
that what are some of the innovative that I have to do
it's a vocation.
And then for my
you go there
so that at the end of the day, when you're no more around,
you go there
leave a
because
legacy that everyone will talk
want
about.
to see
But if you're outside there,
justice,
sitting by
economic
there,
justice,
wait for people
political
to
justice,
or to be
there.
dependent, then
You go to civil society because
the Gambia we
you
want
see a government.
We want the Gambia
like
that
what we have,
is inclusive to everybody.
Flouting, usurping the powers, the sovereignty of the people, and want to engage to hold that government accountable, to make sure that government is responsive, is transparent, is accountable. But also you see a private sector
anyway, for now,
that is engaged in unethical business practices, social to the people, practically cheating
we all
the
know
people,
what has happened
damaging people's environment.
in the past.
And you go to the civil society because you want to stand against big businesses. You want to stand against big industries that are damaging our pollution, our environment, so civil society is not somewhere you go to be in some cozy environment to earn a living. And so our civil society in the Gambia, and again, as Emmanuel gave some background, it's important to also
whatever is being done right now is just a continuation, but we haven't seen anything yet that we know is a new innovation,
civil society in the Gambia, you can mention action aids.
As of now, let's just see
organizations like CRS
and then
or
we'll be
CCF
able to learn
or even VSO, even though in UK they may not be CSO. But the work that they came to do here were like charities. They came to provide education because they consider the Gambia
I'll be so excited because when I was a child, I can remember when I was in junior school and primary school.
So imagine
I am somebody that I've ever been a leader in my school. And most of the time, I am selected to join the Independence Celebration Day. That is where you go to the practice square and then do the march past and then Independence Day. So for that being the case, as a child, I used to be so excited and always, eager to wear my uniform, my shoe, my stuff, all those stuff. So that, it's a joy, and then it's very nice when you're holding the banner of your school, and then marching, and people pass by, and then people will be like, I saw your child, it was participating, at the independence, only that is a joy. And when you go back to school again, your friends and then everybody will be like, I saw you on TV yesterday. So those were my joyful moments during my time when I was going to school as a child, and then as a responsible parent as well. And still now, too, I can say
very concept idea of civil society as a social justice.
I mean, today we are here and raising the occasion with different organizations from different backgrounds, people that you have never seen some months back. We have seen them today. It's a joy and in celebration, and all of us we are cheering one another. And then I mean, it's always nice. Some of us you will see standing at one corner chatting, hugging each other, clapping and laughing because we've missed that connection. So all in all, independence is a special day. But then, yeah.
Honestly,
yes.
As a necessary action to bring about change, one regime or government was here for 30 years. So, it put to place, and things continue. So I think, as the dictatorship was building, largely because overall, the citizens failed to take their stands. Dictatorship emerged in a way that it did not find government civil society prepared, aware, conscious, organized in order to address the dictatorship. So imagine 2000, what did government civil society do? Nothing. Because you can't even agree. And as Emmanuel said, also in the civil society, some people until 2016 said civil society should join. Support this. They come with slogans like partners in the government. We are partners in the government with the government. And I've always asked this question, what is a partner? Are we enemies?
Yes, my final word to the viewers and then the young people out there is let us take the ownership and let us make sure that we can any part that we can do towards the nation development of this country. And then also tell our young African leaders who are leaders too, let them not leave young people behind. Because all of us that you are seeing, we are talented in what we do. So let's make sure that we always put the young people agenda. Let's make sure that we are always inclusive. We don't want to see a Gambia, because inside artists, they said the Gambia we want. So now the Gambia we want is, we want to see that Gambia, that all the youth are inclusive. We want to see that Gambia that youth are not marginalized, they are not discriminated. And we want to see that Gambia, but we don't want to see tribalism and religious. We know that we all want, and together we can build a brighter future. Thank you.
Some of you may be surprised to know that at least from 2010, everything that took place in this country, we would have an in-house statement at Taiwo to issue it out to condemn what was happening. But you cannot even get the civil society community agree that we should release this. Money, they can arrest us, they can kill you. If they kill you, nobody will come out. You see what happened to data and all of that. So in the end, this so-called fear involved everyone. And so, but that was happening also, the Ghanaian civil society, especially individual activists within the civil society, we are doing serious work to expose the corruption, the violations, the bad governance in the Gambia. So we have submitted a lot of reports to international organizations about what was happening in the Gambia, United Nations, EU, ECOWAS, and so on. Weekly reports are leaving this country. I know in the dark, of night, Ghanaian civil society activists were transported here across Banjo, vehicles waiting in Karen, transported to address diplomacy in Senegal to speak to the issues in the Gambia. So serious issues are also happening on the ground that a lot of folks don't know. So a lot of decisions made by EU, for example, or the United Nations, that governments come to know and applaud, that they didn't know this were influenced by the information from the government civil society. A lot of decisions were taken by Yajame that people applaud. They didn't know he took those decisions because he was under pressure
because all countries like I said depend on other countries for one thing.
So these are the things happening until, of course, we got to 2016, and we saw the Ghana Association
in the international market. We always depend
was
on
the
other
first to
countries
issue
for something. So
a statement that Ghana must go.
Yeah, so
yeah. So if anything, that was a turning point for Ghanaian civil society. Now going forward, maybe that question would come. What we should do now, But this was the context, and and it explains how therefore
they decided that they were not going to be silenced.
With all our laws, our rights specified in our constitution, with the presence of the African Commission here, with the Banyu Charter, with our history, as Emmanuel beautifully said,
I don't think the
how come this one man can just sit on everyone's head, just like
the Gambia people, I don't think will never regret changing the old regime into a new one, because we've been through a lot and
thank you very much.
And it was about time that we
one lesson we've learned
it was about time that we
civil society was overwhelmed.
The
speed at which
we did decide.
The system of building leadership so fast, so intense,
and again
that you could not catch up. Because the consciousness was there, the preparedness was there, and so on and so forth. That brings me to
in the 2 years of
obviously media
who do you think has worked a lot?
Suffered a lot.
I think Gambian people should not. I mean, it is very good that we focus on making changes that we want in our country. And it is very important that we understand it is not about what these leaders are doing so we can determine who was a better leader or not. This is about who used the Gambian taxpayers' money to bring about the change that every Gambian wants to happen. So this is about us holding our leaders to account to do the things that we voted them into office. This is not supposed to be which president did better than the other president, because we voted them in for a purpose. We voted them in because we wanted difference. We want to change in our communities. We want to change in all the basic necessities that we need, So it's about holding our leaders to account to make sure they serve in our best interest and the best interest of the communities that we live in, and to make sure that they do exactly why we voted them into office.
Take us down in the memory as I'm growing up as a child since Gambia has independence. Which year was your best or enjoying with independence?
Well, I have never really been part of independence celebrations because I was not a big fan of having kids wear uniforms and go to the Makati Square and parade all over the place under the hot sun. And then I think independence is a day of reflection. It's a day where we are supposed to discuss where we came from, how long we've come, and where we are heading as a nation and as a people. So it's not supposed to be a day where we are going to parade around in uniforms, celebrating this, singing songs, marching for a person. So I was never really a part of independence celebrations. And I was born in 1998, and till 2016, I think the only time that I went to celebrate an independence celebration was in 2016, February 2016, when I was the head girl of my school and I couldn't avoid, going. But apart from that, I've never really been to an independence celebration because we're supposed to celebrate independence for a difference. We're supposed to celebrate independence as a people, having dialogue and engagements and seeing how best we can put in collective efforts as people, particularly as young people who make up the most significant number in our Ghanaian population, to see how we can all move our country forward. That is supposed to be the common goal, not to, have people seated around and parade in uniforms. I think that is just a big joke, and we have to be way over that as a people. Yeah.
That's your opinion?
Yeah, that's my opinion.
So Ms. Lalo, can you please sing the national anthem for us?
Yeah, I surely can. I have a horrible voice.
It's okay.
Okay. For the Gambia, we strive that only freedom, let justice guide towards the common, and join our endeavors to prove man's brother.
We pledge our firm allegiance, our promise we renew. Keep us with God of nations to the Gambia.
You have a golden voice.
Thank you very much.
What is your final message to our viewers?
Well, I would say we are very happy that we are here today. We are here to celebrate our freedom. We are here to celebrate the liberation of our nation. We are here to celebrate all the fallen legends who were in the front line to fight for our independence, who were in the front line to make sure that we have our dignity back, our pride back, to have our nation back. And this is a day we also remember all the people who lost their lives along the way, for the people who suffered for 22 years in this country. This is the day we celebrate our heroes. This is the day we celebrate the ordinary Gambian person out there who has to wake up as early as 5 o'clock to make sure that they can send their kids to school, to the farmers, the tailors, the fishermen, everybody. This is a day of reflection, and we celebrate Gambia. We celebrate Gambians as a people. And this is also a day where we affirm our allegiance to make sure that we build the country a better Gambia, the better Gambia that we've always wanted. And I hope next year, by this time next year, we would have achieved a lot as young people and as citizens of the Gambia. We have a long way to go, and I believe as young people we are prepared to take this fight on, and we are prepared to make sacrifices and whatever it takes to make sure that we build the Gambia that we want for our children and future generations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And say that
please say something to counter whatever that man over there is saying. I don't know what he's saying. I don't even know what he's saying.
We are communities and some activists, some of who are now complaining about Barrow, wanting to hang on the power. But then my colleagues were mad at me. We needed to romanticize it, we needed to condone it. It was too early to scrutinize it for the last going back to decades before that, this is what happens to the
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This ay our belief at this pinakamatay na mo pagtali nyo na pinakamatay na mo kung ganaw buhay pinakamatay na takiniti nyo pagtali po jamono pinakamatay na mo mo ko 1965 joge ko nyo be 1994 yung am yung gis Gambia tayo mo ito 54 years yung pinaka sa Westfield our gis lolo dan mo lang motivate because dapat ni tumorong pa yung bari gis na nyo dapat pagkili siya jamon because no one is how it is good so lang mo lang motivate yung away
There's so many things that Can you explain exactly that is the man being a hip-hop artist and an activist? I was very happy. I'm not very happy. The new artist come different things that people laugh okay, let me just be part of it and try to make a change.
loolu moom dëgg la nag artistes yi seen place dafa important trop because dafa mel ni comme music ñu dem pass through the society da ngeen di jàngale society so it's very good that the artists also engage in this all those things léegi nag tey nag ñu gis nag Gambia is turning to 54 tey nag ñu ñëpp ñu ngi fi am dañu kontaan trop ñu la nag tere ndax foog nga ne Gambia is very
am na yenn aha yenn fi doomu aadama da nga war a jox ñoom am na ñu bëri ñoo xam ne ñu fi like lu leen daloon si paas mooy ñuuri Jammeh bi nga victimes yooyu noonu ñu fi ba léegi so ñooñu comme dañ leen war a gestu di leen neemeeku when it comes to food hospitals we all know it's very poor when it comes to the kids when it comes to education when it comes to the security, there's a lot of things we have to fix. And community, like, we have the power to do
wax na ne comme Gambia yow believe na ne dañ independent so my other question that will throw me to other question certain question because ñu bëri ñu ngi claim ne Gambia dañ dee depend more on international si yeneen dëkk pour ñu help si ay loan ay grants ay technical help léegi nag yow nga gisee
I wasn't really thinking about that. Why? Because I'm not responsible. Okay, so I will face myself. Because Gambia, I don't think it should take like decades. Understand? But now, right now, what are you adequate? Like, because when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to health, I do believe that we have like good doctors. Why am I feeling like good doctors? Then what I invest over them, and okay, then nobody they come like Alice, but personally, I think that there's money here, but them just feel that like we do not spend it wisely because I'm the Ubari or I'm the fee one number fix the lady
yow lan nga gis nag ci Gambia si fu mu toll lan nga gis ni la government step boobu la ñu war a jël pour mu repair all those things yi nga xamante ne comme am jotuñ ko am comme noo ko wane rek sof a xangin léegi nag yow ban action nga foog nag government boobu la ñu war a
okay man all I can say mooy comme gars yi it's very important because I'm not very low handed and put it together. But guys, then you restrict a lot. Like even when you want to protest peacefully, you against like Chakasora everywhere, just like said, just say. So I think community, the other thing is like when it comes to I'm the organization against human trafficking because government sign like agreements so brilliant. As a hip-hop artist, I like the words. We are moving from God's band.
When they used to ask Jama, where do you get all this money from? He said from God's bank.
So as an artist,
Now that's really what I agree with you. We, Eastern African people, we like to glorify. We romanticize them. We turn them into dictators. We transform them into monsters. We make them think that they are omnipotent. We make them the Leviathan, all-encompassing. Think that they are above the law, and equality belongs to them, and everything that is in the country belongs to them. It's getting very interesting at this stage. I'd like to have this session as an interactive session that I'll open the floor before I ask my final questions. Or any comments. If I have any questions for my panelists here, feel free to come up and
let's talk about the most important things. Don't let them get affected.
Anybody with any questions?
In 2016, gis nañ ne Gambia ni dem nañ ci cour fi ñu decide bega use the Gambia has decided. Yow really foog nga ne Gambia has decided.
Gambia has decided because okay, we say power to the people. Yeah. So we say mu jógee fi ñaan la so that's why guys like Gambia has decided. But now we're saying like the Gambia we want, like what for some Gambia then
Gambia ni you fight bega use we voted for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. That's where the night around 22 years.
Viewers, people, you will understand that slow.
We are here. We can say the Gambia has decided, and the Gambia, the collective will of the Gambia, your vote, your decision in promoting and strengthening democracy, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. 22 years ago, during Gambia's time, this wouldn't have been possible. Kakuru, you and me wouldn't have been here. None of us would have been at NIA. We would have been killed by them. Salim Child, Mani Jabade, even this in there, speaking to two people about this before we get to this stage, they would have been yanked away and taken thrown to the crocodile. This is
it's a Gambia that is fair when it comes to people, treating people equally. When it comes to security, I think it's very weak. But when it comes to like police brutality, and I'm feeling all the time police's approach is always wrong. The way they treat us is very bad. Understand that? Because I had this incident. I was just going to the beach, figure season bag evening. Understand that? So the guy was like, it was like 9 a.m. 5 after 5 so mama wane tuba bi rek wara nek ci beach. So man luma ko wax moy, so you're telling me that Gambians are not allowed in their own beaches. Ma feel like fi ñu ni neen sax comme am na ñoo xamné like tuba bi leen gëna motax tamit ñom ñu am ñu xanga de def so when it comes to security, when it comes to safety, you said that like everybody and not just one side.
But I mean, as a private citizen, I take religion to be a personal matter. And what I believe, what Mohammed believes, what Ismail believes, what Ibrahim Adem himself believes, for me that's entirely your issue. Gambia, we should have a secular state. A secular state that is matters of public policy, matters of national development, matters of lawmaking, and the performance functions of our public institutions. It should not be based on any religion or any religious ideas. Rather, our laws should protect
the rights of all citizens to practice their religion, to worship whatever religion they believe. And the state must protect each other's rights as whatever religion you believe to practice it so that nobody else infringes on it. It's unfortunate in the conversation we are having how one man could rule this, that we've had our religious leaders go beyond their limit to support, engage in public policy, in political affairs to the point of having what we have. And so I think on the new government moving forward, we should completely separate these two and recognize that religion is not a matter for the management of our state and our development process.
Because of atrocities jota def like terrorism fi jota torture ñu fi jota haga ñu fi jota rey which is very wrong haga so kooku man duma mën a sori si when it comes to Adam Barrow like right now like man si man personally gisuma dara bu nekk I don't even think that the building would decide that after every time the family we do not have this. That's how I feel.
Sorry, feeling that way.
No, it's alright, but some smart gets that. Yeah.
Sister on business. Time of you back to memory. From the Dagestan had independence. But for some independence, you don't enjoy than any other. Because independent Roman the first regime before that independence, independence your experience. But not
okay, I'll take you back because when I was in, I think now it pains me so much when I am I see what assembly again and like everybody gets excited. So I could remember that year. I think so it was the first time somebody got me like and I was very happy like as a kid because you don't know anything. So it was memorable because participate dancing students march and you take so yeah, it was a great but from Tay right now I want to say a big thank you to the Gambia has decided to take responsibility in their communities, and yet they start and they sit down just to see that this is really successful. Now it's a more of all of it. To take responsibility in their communities in our schools. So you see for some years that this problem so that we can hang up be better in whatever we're doing. So I'm saying a big thank you.
What is a way with that new business one of you have some tips like to the
ñaata jigéen leen fi tëj woon góor te ba tey amul wér bu yaram dee ne preparations never ever ñu ne
Alright, good afternoon, wonderful audiences out there. I am Lamin Jai, and my picture will be very quick. It goes to all of the three panelists. The first one is to Maya. I mean, you speak of, or you talk about the need of civil society to know their stand, the democracy, like the Gambia, though there has been democracy before. Now, what we are actually is young. So now, looking at the business sector in this country today, the need for human rights to be considered in the business case. That's where question you are doing. What do you think civil society can do to make a case for human rights in business? Because we have seen there are many companies, transnational companies and local companies in this country that are employing young people. But you will learn that I encounter that many young people are in these companies, but they do not know or they don't know their labor rights. And most of the time, these rights are violated, but they don't know the platform or where to seek for remedy or redress. The other one goes to the media fraternity. You speak of investigative journalism, and you said today many journalists are born. Let me say many journalists are born in this country, but all of them will categorize themselves as investigative journalists. What do you think investigative journalists, what is the level of investigative journalism at people like that should somebody be an investigative journalist?
Ya, saya jadi hari ini semua question bad because semua question semua races semua question bad. So what final message I have
Okay. Sure. That was horrible. The way we sang it. Anyways, the last message I have to hear let's pick up. You know, all the time it's my songs. Like, just come out, share your stories. People need to hear you. Like, so share your story. Like, you motivate so many people that when they look with you, so what I have to say is like, singing praises for the again.
Thank you very much.
PowerPoint of the country. How can we change this as young
Hi, my name is
No boleh, ya gue.
Oke, ini udah mati.
No boleh, ya
Ini
gue.
ada bijian sih, mama ada mana ke bijian sih.
Alright, good afternoon everyone. I have one system. My question and two questions, one for Madi and one for both Madi and Mr. Juk. Madi, my question is, in this new Gambia, what is the role of the civil society in serving as a check and balance mechanism to serve its proper role? That's for Madi. And the second question is for Mr. Juk and Madi as well. In this Jammeh's dictatorship era, do we associate this to weak public institutions or we associate it to an unaware citizenship? Thank you.
Weak public institutions or unaware citizens? Yes. So we have two more, isn't it?
Thank you very much. My name is Sana, and then my question is to Uncle Madi regarding the civil society. We have known that it's because of the lapses that the civil society registered. That's why dictatorship prevailed in the Gambia. So my question is, are you prepared as a civil society to make sure that dictatorship does not come back to the Gambia? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ibu.
Good afternoon, my name is Ibutal, and my question, I have a couple of questions here. So my first question is to the media. You said something about investigative journalism, but then I'd like to ask, how would you go about it? Because I believe that for the government to perform, and one of the reasons that Jammeh prevailed is because that there was a lack of pressure being put on him. And because of the lack of pressure being put on him by the media, he could get away with a lot of things. And my second question is that for the civil society, one quality of a good leader is to be able to accept criticism. And then for that we have to also put pressure on our leaders and the leaders in our country, or else they won't be able to perform. So what will you guys be able to do? What will you guys do to go about this?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Brilliant. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Awasise, and my question goes to the Senate Junior. We've just seen which the president gave fake news on TV that a bag of rice costs less than 1,000 rupees. And so far, we have not seen any media outlet with any investigation on that. That's very easy. And also on the case of the deportees, we've seen the former, my party and the others say, each of them are saying they did not sign it. And these are things that have been happening. The boys are already here. What investigations are in place to let the people know what exactly is happening?
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammed Jaune. My question goes to you. My question goes to you, Mr. Jawate. There is a part in the human rights here which says no to discrimination. What I don't understand here is that in terms of these homosexuals and these lesbian things, should we also not discriminate that? And we also know that here is a country whereby we have two religions, that is Christianity and Muslims. Should we be fearful of the Western world and take this law, or what should we do? Should we protect and like we say we believe in Allah, we should not do this? What should we do?
Okay, so two questions on the issue of investigative journalism, and then two on youth issues that I will take. The rest, Mari and Emmanuel can. But then the issue of investigative, first of all, I want to make this clear. The first person who asked the investigative journalism question say every Gambian journalist consider themselves as investigative journalists. I doubt that, because look, investigative journalism is in itself a career. This is the most advanced form of journalism. Not even in anywhere in the world, in the most advanced countries, you have journalists who war correspondents, like hardened war correspondents, they did everything. But investigative journalism is not common sense. It's rocket science. It requires a lot. It requires so much and requires an expertise as well. So in the country, collectively, the three questions that were asked pertaining investigative journalism, I've admitted that, I've said that in my intervention, that one of the ways we fail, or areas we fail the Gambian people, is the fact that we've not so far been able to put forward or give you investigative journalists or investigative work. We've not been able to do that. So this is a failing. It's not even a failing. This is, I attributed a lot of things to what we had in the past. That is why one of the first trainings of last year that the GPU conducted was about investigative journalism, but it was not even close to being enough to prepare our journalists to take on this. Efforts are on the way. As you know, the GPU represents media practitioners in the country. We don't tell them what to report and what not to report. We look at their welfare, we look at their capacity building issues to train them, but at the end of the day, it is up to their individual media houses, media outlets, and institutions to do what they want to do. We cannot go to any media house to tell them do this or do that. What I can promise and what I can put on the table before everybody here is that this is the reason why we have the Chronicle newspaper. The Chronicle is born out of this desire and out of these gray areas in journalism. Howard Sise, you mentioned the issue of the deportees and the issue of rice. Yeah, when the president said bag of rice, you can get it for less than 1,000. So I'm not sure if the media, any media outlet, including the Fado Network where you work, our weather day, they look at this just beyond what Barrow said to put forward to the president that he might have been misled by somebody. But I think if that is not true, what that shows and what the media could have centered stories around on is how detached, possibly how detached the president is from the rest of us. Because if you have a president who was a businessman who should have known about rice and everything, now telling us the price of rice, which might be a bit, not correct, then that shows that the big walls of State House might be separating our chief servant from the rest of us. And this is what the media should have done. But then if journalists, if journalists fail to do this, it is not the role of the GPU to tell them to do this. We can build their capacity and things like that, but at the end of the day, their choice and everything is up to them. The issue quickly on 2 people or 3 people asked about what needs to be done, advice for the young people, the youth. As a young person myself, my advice is, especially in the areas of protecting yourself from political manipulation and things like that, young Gambian people, all of us, for me, I've seen a trend and I've always realized this trend and I've always built something around this trend. We are so committed all of you, these young Gambian people, so passionate, so committed, so helpful, so obsessed with youth work. But what you miss, what we miss oftentimes is the fact that you do all this work for people, for institutions, in the name of patriotism. You forget about economic independence, you forget about economic empowerment. Where you can work to eke out a living, to get salary, to get payment, of course legally, choose that over voluntary work where you are not paid, where you don't get anything, where you become more vulnerable to any manipulation, to politicians coming, giving you money. Like somebody say, you need to think about your economic empowerment. You need to think about source of living, because if you have a salary, if you have money, I mean, that might not build big story buildings, but it makes you financially comfortable to spend every day your fare and everything. I think then your risk of vulnerability and gullibility are minimized. But every time young people, so many young people volunteering for, I think some young people are doing voluntary work for 10 different institutions. Nobody pay you, nobody give you anything, but you're doing it quote unquote in the interest of your country, and you forget about your pockets. When you do that, you cannot fight for anything, because it's very easy for anybody to come and give you money and buy your soul.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. There are a lot of questions, but I think I'll quickly talk about civil society. I think it is a settled fact that civil society plays a fundamental role in checking the excesses of any government, and it has been so for a very long time. You look at from America during anti-apartheid and many other countries, that civil society is the driving force for change, because these are groups that come together to promote a particular interest. Politicians will always be politicians, and I think if we know that, we will know that they have an agenda, and an agenda is to stay in power and rule. But civil society does play a role, and they play a very important and fundamental role. I think there was another question linked to this, was the problem of JAME a weak institution or lack of awareness? I think it was both and even much more. Let us not limit it to that. It was weak institutions. JAME destroyed the institutions. JAME destroyed the wonderful civil service that we have. JAME destroyed the independence of the judiciary. He made sure that he needed to do so for him to rule with impunity. But not only that, there was other things. There was sycophancy was a problem. Hypocrisy was a problem. Bigotry, tribalism. These were all part and parcel of it. It was not only a weak institution. But of course, lack of awareness was part of it. JAME would not condone this kind of forum, because it will raise awareness of the people. And this is what dictatorship does. They will not want you to discuss issues. So the problem was much more than that. Religion. I think Mari dealt with it earlier. Religion is always a very sensitive issue, especially as far as Gambia is concerned. We are predominantly a Muslim nation, and also Muslim and Christians. But I think we have to be very careful here. I have seen an agenda being drawn recently, especially when you mention the word secularism. You see, the word secularism has been attacked. I've seen it, I've heard it in audios. It has been in our 1997 constitution. Anyway, if you look at section 1, it says that the Gambia is a sovereign and a secular state. But all of a sudden, it is an issue as if it's something that is going to be introduced to destroy religion. Secularism doesn't mean that it's anti-religion. It's what Madi eloquently stated. We have the state, which is not based on religion, of course. We cannot run away from the fact that we conduct our marriages, our burials, our wills, if you're a Muslim, based on your religion. But when we talk about secularism, we're saying that the state is not there to favor any religion. But I've seen it when you say secularism today. Those who should have actually, I wish that those people were out there telling Yahya Jammeh that it is wrong to do extrajudicial killing, it is wrong to torture people, rather than harp on one point on secularism. I don't think when we say secularism, we're trying to destroy any religion or say that the Gambia is a country without religion. Another issue is reform of laws. I think somebody talked about labor laws.
if you ask me, there is a lot of laws that need to be reformed in the Gambia. There are a lot of laws that are incompatible with even the treaties that we have signed. There are a lot of laws that are even incompatible with our own constitution, fundamental rights and freedom. And I've just been reading recently that the government is going to contract someone to start reviewing the laws so that it will be compatible with the treaty provisions and also our constitution. And I must tell you that part of the mandate of the newly constituted Human Rights Commission is also law reform and law review, to advise the government and to come up with new laws and revise the laws that are incompatible with our current laws. And key to it, everybody has talked about, is our Public Order Act, issues relating to license. I saw the IGP issuing warning, even issues relating to crowd control. There are a lot of things that need to be reformed in this country. And I hope in due course, and with the establishment of an independent Human Rights Commission, the government will be engaged, and we have to reorient our own people. We have to reorient our security forces. For 22 years, you don't expect them to change. Their way was to shoot people, to brutalize people. And it's amazing when we just hope that, or think that they will change. 22 years is a long period. You have people who have been conditioned into abusing people's rights. So these things will need to change and with time. Last issue is the issue of non-discrimination. Someone mentioned a very interesting topic about gay, I think homosexual. What I will tell you is that our constitution is very clear in terms of non-discrimination. It says that nobody should be discriminated based on any other base, whether it's religion, tribe, gender, sex. So we have a non-discriminatory clause. I don't think we have enough time to debate the issue of non-discrimination. But what I would say that in the Gambia, we, for example, every country has its own cultural norms. We don't recognize gay marriages. It's not something in our laws that we have recognized, if that is what you're asking me. But at the same time, I don't think this country, based on our criminal law and our non-discrimination clause, we're not saying that if somebody has a different sexual orientation, you should go and kill them or deprive them of jobs. I hope I am very clear in this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe I have a little to say, given what they have said. But if I have to start with LGBT rights, gay rights, as Emmanuel said, our constitution guarantees the right not to be discriminated based on one's tribe, religion, or your gender, of course, your social orientation, or any other status. So as far as I'm concerned, and this goes back to the secular issue as well, this Gambia belongs to Gambians, all right? Sovereignty of the Gambia resides in each and every Gambian. No one has a greater sovereignty than the other one. And so if we live in this society, and I'm a Muslim, and he's a Christian, what authority do I have? What power do I have? What right do I have to determine how someone should practice his or her religion? Or how someone should dress? Or how someone should love another person? I have no right or power to decide that. Because if I do, it means I'm using my religion, my culture, to determine the way of life of another Gambian. What if that Gambian also says, according to his or her religion, I should not do this or that? Are we not going into war? So for me, if a Gambian wants to be gay, fine, be it. All right? It is not my job to determine who you should marry or not marry. I will practice my religion as my religion says. But if you believe in your religion or whatever you believe, you want to be something else, be it just that don't infringe or prevent me from exercising my rights. All right? Because this Gambia doesn't belong to Muslims alone. It doesn't belong to Christians alone. It doesn't belong to non-believers alone. It belongs to all of us. And no one culture or religion can determine how we should live in this country. So anyone who wants to fight against gay rights, I'm ready to defend anyone who wants to be gay. Let me make it clear. All right? For the youth, and this particularly for the youth, we are here because of you. This is about you. My generation, look at the panel, what happened. We had our dads come. They had their time. They talked about it. We came, our generation, I tell my colleagues, our generation is a lost generation because in our prime, we spent it on a dictatorship. We were either forced out, forced to be silent, or even to collaborate. And, you know, we are now counting 50 towards 50. And going up in 10, 15 years time, we are going to be retired. So it's you in your 20s, in your 30s, that this issue is about. So your role is to make sure it never happens here again, to make sure you have the space to contribute, to determine the kind of Gambia you want. That is the issue. Regardless of what political party you support or politician, regardless of who is the president, regardless of what religion or